Good afternoon and welcome to Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority here on 103.5 WNHH. You can listen to us anytime on our YouTube page, on the New Haven Independence YouTube page. Just search for Liquid Lunch, or as a podcast through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'm Kevin Watsey. I am the Director of Public Affairs at the Regional Water Authority. I am a water nerd, and today we are going to totally nerd out, not really about water, kind of about water. We're going to do songs about water today. These are songs that technically are not about water, but they have some kind of allusion to water in their title, whether it's water, rivers, streams, not tears, because we thought that would be too sad, but any kind of allusion to water in the title. So we're just going to run down a list of songs with allusions to water in their titles, tell you a little history about those songs, and have a little fun. And to help me do that today, I have a good friend and colleague of mine, Ed Crowder. Ed is the Senior Communications Specialist at the Regional Water Authority. He works on my team, and I twisted his arm to come in and just have a fun conversation about water songs with me. So, like we do every show before we kick off this, what I hope to be very fun show about songs and water, we're going to let Ed tell us his story. So, Ed, welcome to Liquid Lunch, and tell us your story.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm not sure really I have a story, but first of all, thanks for inviting me on.
Everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story. So yeah, I mean, to the extent that I have one, I was born here in New Haven at Yale New Haven Hospital, somewhere that way. Which way are we facing?
Yeah.
And I grew up first in Madison, and then we moved to Hamden on my 4th birthday. So pretty local, and I've stayed most of my life within RWA service territory. I live in Bethany now, which is just outside, but I actually live on a property that abuts RWA land. So
yeah, we looked past that when we hired him.
Yeah. I went to Hamden schools. Sorry about that. So I went to school in Hamden and lived in New Haven for about 15 years. Finished my bachelor's degree at Southern Connecticut State University in journalism, and my master's degree at Quinnipiac. I worked for a while, actually right out of Southern. I worked at the West Haven News as their editor, which was great because I knew absolutely nothing about the city of West Haven. And, almost not too much more than that about actually running a newspaper. So that was fun. And after that, I ping-ponged for a while between various Connecticut dailies, and I think it was 2007, I had an opportunity to come to United Illuminating as a communications manager there, and worked there for a while. We went through a couple of transitions. We acquired some gas companies along the way, Southern Connecticut Gas and Connecticut Natural Gas, and then we're part of sort of this big transaction in which we were mostly acquired by a global energy company called Iberdrola, and sort of spun out as an independent company of its own. So yeah, I kind of got a good look at the inside of the electric and gas and renewable energy fields. And then in 2019, I had my son Kai, who's now 6, and shortly after that, the COVID pandemic hit, and I spent a couple of years working in my basement, taking care of a very young child, and decided it was just time to do something different. So I left Avantgrid and spent some time just kind of casting around, looking for sort of my next gig, and very happily I saw an opportunity at the Regional Water Authority. Met with Kevin. I think we kind of had realized we had a rapport going right away, and he invited me to come on board. So I've been there for the last 2 years. I've been learning quite a lot about water. I don't think I'd call myself a water nerd at this stage. I aspire to some sort of nerddom.
See, but you're close to having what I would call the big four, right? Hopefully you never get the big four, but you've done gas, electric, water. You just haven't done sewer yet. So, and hopefully you never need to go work for a sewer company. But in the utility world, that's the big four, working for and if you want to do a fifth telecom.
Well, I'm still young, Kevin. So
Yeah, but I'm saying hopefully you stay with the RWA and you will have no need to go work for a sewer company. Um, well, that's great, and we are thrilled to have Ed on the team over at the RWA. He kind of it's great because you bring a good perspective both from the world of journalism, having worked there for a number of years, and then having worked at Avangrid. You really do bring that perspective of what do other utilities do, and what do the journalists want to hear, and how do we pitch stories the right way so that our customers get to hear all the cool things that we're doing. So uh, I'm thrilled that Ed came to work with us, and I'm thrilled that you're here today because we're going to talk about some music. Unfortunately, our show's budget, which is zero, does not allow us to actually play any of these songs. So as we talk about these songs out there in the world, you're just
gonna sing, right?
I'm not going to
Oh,
sing.
come on.
I will want to sing, but no, I'm not going to sing. But folks can use their imagination. I don't think we're going to go too obscure on any of these songs. Most of these songs, I would think people have heard. But I guess let's start off. These are in no particular order, by the way. These are just songs that between Ed and I we came up with off the top of our head, maybe a little Google search. I'm going to start off with a song that I actually do love. It's a song by Neil Sedaka, and it's called "Laughter in the Rain." From
That's a great one.
It is a great song. It's a song if you're not familiar with Neil Sedaka. So Neil Sedaka was like a teenage heartthrob in the 50s. He did Calendar Girl and Carol, and he did all these great songs.
Wasn't he part of one of those doo-wop groups too?
He was not a part of a doo-wop group, but he did a lot of doo-wop,
Okay.
and he wrote a lot of songs for other people too. He was part of the Brill Building, writing songs in the late 50s. And then Neil Sedaka, along with many other people's careers, pretty much ended in 1961, 62, when the Beatles came along and changed the world, right? So a lot of very good musicians just basically had no market anymore. Neil Sedaka was one of them. And for about a good 10 years or so, Neil Sedaka didn't really do much. And then he was at a party, and Elton John was there, and Elton John was a huge Neil Sedaka fan, told him he wanted to do an album with him, and that led to an album that was called Sedaka is Back. And Laughter in the Rain is on that album, produced by Elton John. Sedaka tells an interesting story about the fact he met Paul McCartney once, and Paul McCartney actually apologized to him because he was a huge Neil Sedaka fan, and he realized what the Beatles had done to guys like Sedaka. Another interesting story about Laughter in the Rain, Ed, and then I'll let you kind of talk about it. Billy Joel and Neil Sedaka tell this story about how Billy Joel one night woke up with this song in his head, and he called up one of the members of his band and started kind of going over what the piano beat of that song would be. And it's Anthony works in a grocery store. What's the name of the song? You ought to know by now.
I think so. Yeah.
So he's humming the tune to his bandmate, and his bandmate says, "You idiot, that's Neil Sedaka's Laughter in the Rain." Oh. And so he had to change it, and that's the song we know now. But so Laughter in the Rain is on my list, Ed, and I don't know if you have any opinions on it. I just think it's a lovely song. I will say when I was young and I heard this song, I really thought it was a female singing it because Neil Sedaka has a very high register.
He does, yeah.
I was very surprised to find out that it was a man, but...
I'm thinking, though, it reminds me so much of what happened when Nirvana came out in the early 90s. Yes. And, all of a sudden these hair metal bands who had been sort of at the top of the charts and at the top of the world before that were like, couldn't get a gig, they couldn't get a gig. They couldn't get work. And it was just, people's tastes had just suddenly changed and they were behind the times. So, I'm glad to see a lot of the hair metal bands now are sort of having a second renaissance, some deservedly, some maybe not so much,
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about there's certain periods of time where a new style of music just comes along and wipes out the old style. So you had like Elvis and that kind of Bill Haley come along in the 50s and wipe out the big bands.
Yeah.
Nobody listened to big bands after that. And then the Beatles wiped out, the next phase, and then that went on until I mean, you could say there was a metal phase that started in the late 60s with Black Sabbath.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then, yeah, that led into hair metal, which led into grunge, and each phase kind of killed 90% of the phase before it.
Yeah.
Metallica is one of the few bands from the 80s to survive the grunge
Well, and they
area
had their
unscathed.
they were scathed a little bit. I mean, if you
Only
saw
by
what
their
they were.
own crappy albums, though.
Okay, Lars could have
Yeah.
used a better snare sound on Saint
Yes.
Anger, but
Yes.
so yeah, but it is like sort of a flood comes by and sweeps everything away, but then there's a process of renewal, which is interestingly sort of a theme of a lot of the songs I think both of us will be bringing up today. I was going to start with a Johnny Cash song.
Go for it.
Yeah, Johnny Cash is. Are you a country fan at all?
Yeah. It's selective. I'm actually wearing all black today, like Johnny Cash.
Yeah, right.
I do like Johnny Cash. I like Little Alan Jackson.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Well, I mean, Johnny Cash is, generally, if somebody says they don't like country music, I'll point them to Johnny Cash and, say check it out, because there is an authenticity in his music. He goes back, he grew up in a poor cotton growing farm family in Arkansas, and lived really hard until he started music. And the song that's first on my list is actually about an experience that he had when he was a young child. This was coming out of the Dust Bowl, and in 1937, I think it was, there was the Ohio River flooded, and it created sort of a cascade effect down into the Mississippi River, which it emptied into, and actually flooded the Cash family farm. And so the song is called 5 Feet High and Rising. And if you're a little bit more modern and that name sort of rings a bell to you, it's actually because the name of the song inspired the sort of landmark album by De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising, which is actually one of the lyrics in this song as well. And I'm not going to try to sing it for you because I would just embarrass myself and probably never get invited back again by Kevin.
By the way, Ed's hosting our next edition of the show, so whether he sings or not, he's actually going to host.
Yeah, you're stuck with me next
Yeah.
week. Sorry, guys. But I can read a little bit of the lyrics.
Go for it.
So 5 feet high and rising. How high is the water, Mama? 2 feet high and rising. How high is the water, Papa? She said it's 2 feet high and rising. We can make it to the road in a homemade boat. That's the only thing we got left that'll float. It's already over, all the wheat and the oats, 2 feet high and rising. And then, of course, it goes on 3 and 4 and 5 feet and gets increasingly dire. But, again, this was a reference to a real memory that Johnny Cash had growing up on a farm in Arkansas. And it's kind of interesting. We were talking about that sort of process of purification. The flood comes and wipes the old away, and then renewal. I mean, you could think about that theme going all the way back to the Bible, but this happened right sort of at the end of the Dust Bowl period in Arkansas, when farmers like Cash's family were really struggling. And the following year, because of the flood, they had this bumper crop of cotton, so it really renewed the land, and ultimately it sort of benefited the Cash family. So I kind of like the circularity there. And then I was also thinking about this song not in 1937, which was the year that he's talking about, but in 1936 and 1938, we had two major floods here in Connecticut. The first one was, I think, a flood of the Connecticut River caused by storms upstate. And the second one in 1938 was a hurricane. I don't think they even named hurricanes back then, but it was a hurricane that just kind of stalled out over the state, and again caused the Connecticut River Valley to flood. And if you go back, look online, you can find pictures of Hartford, downtown Hartford, with water, people rowing around in boats, and water coming up to, the top third of the first floor windows of the department stores. So, it was really, those are really quite serious events here in Connecticut.
It's really a testament to the power of water. You
Yeah.
know, they say a couple inches of water can lift a car away, and it's we at the water company, we kind of we have our reservoirs and our underground water, but we have a full appreciation for just the sheer power that water has. If you're listening to this week that we recorded, Texas is dealing with some horrible flooding. Was it last year? Connecticut, we had that 13 inches of rain in one day, and
Yep.
up in the valley,
I think
got
they're still
flooded.
repairing the damage.
They're
from
still
that in
repairing the
Oxford,
damage. So, but back to the music. So Johnny Cash, I heard an interesting story, and I assume it's true because it was told by Waylon Jennings. So, yeah, Johnny Cash did Folsom Prison, and he sang at Folsom Prison. Waylon Jennings was a prisoner during the Johnny Cash
Are
concert
you
and
serious?
says that changed his life. Seeing Johnny Cash there made him want to become a country singer, and the rest is literally history. Yeah, Waylon Jennings was a prisoner at Folsom Prison when Johnny Cash played there.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's of course,
Kinda makes
married to
sense.
June Carter Cash.
Yep.
They were singing family, and the devastating version of that Nine Inch Nails song that Johnny Cash did right before he died. Hurt. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
If you haven't listened to that, go online, look up "Hurt" by Johnny Cash. It's a song originally sung by Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, industrial metal, whatever you want to call it. And Johnny Cash just kind of took it and made it his own, sort of towards the end of his life. And what was that album called? American Songs or something?
Yeah, something. I forget the name of it, but
Yeah.
that the video for Hurt is just. Yeah.
You just hear the pain in his voice.
Yes.
I mean, he lives that song.
And I think he passed away. I want to say he passed away within a couple weeks of that song coming out. It
was very soon after
it was
that.
very soon after. Well, that's a good one. So we did Laughter in the Rain, and then Ed decided to turn it dark and go with a song about floods and all that.
What do you got next?
What do I got next? So next I have a song that probably everybody's familiar with, but you may not be familiar with the origins of it, and that's Purple Rain by Prince. I actually didn't know too much about this song when I put it on my list until I did some research. And what I learned was, and see, this is going to tie into your thing. Purple Rain was written by Prince as a country song. And
Really?
it was written to be a duet with Stevie Nicks. And
that would have been interesting.
It would have been interesting. So they sent Stevie a 10-minute instrumental demo of this song. And according to Stevie, it kind of freaked her out because it was a 10-minute song and that's not what she was about. So she declined. And so Prince decided to just record it as a solo song. And when they went into the studio, he heard his guitar player just jamming to the notes, but playing it in a much different way. And on the spot, Prince decided this isn't a country song anymore. And what they recorded that day is what we all know as Purple Rain.
Yeah, I'm trying to reimagine that in my head now as a country song with I guess country instruments and Stevie Nicks singing, and which would have been awesome, by the way. I'm so sorry that never happened. Maybe after the fact. I mean, she did duets with with other rock musicians, but the Prince thing would have been great.
Prince thing would have been great. And I've heard from many people that Prince, before he tragically died, has so many unreleased songs in the vault that they could probably put out 10 to 15 albums. I've heard he has a complete hard rock metal album that they could put together because Prince was
please make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, people may not know this. Prince was a incredibly good guitar player.
He was. I mean, I would say Prince was. I'm going to get knocked for this, and I'll probably, get you a bunch of downvotes or whatever on YouTube.
Nah.
But I would say Prince was probably one of the top 10 rock guitarists of all time. It just got overlooked because he was, such a great songwriter.
He was poppy,
and he was poppy. Yeah, he played pop. But look at what he did with the. It was a celebration of George Harrison, and they played "While My Guitar Gently Weeps." Look this up on YouTube, and he plays a solo in it. I think that just about every jaw in that room was dropped down to their knees because he just blew it away. He was a fantastic rock guitarist.
Yeah, guitar players who know guitar will often put him in the top 5 or 10 greatest rock guitar players of all time. The talent was undeniable. I actually worked a Prince concert once, and everybody knows he's short, but to actually
he's like what, 4'11", something like that.
He was probably 5 foot tall. I mean, it's just it was striking when he walked by me to just see how small he was. But for such a, small in stature, but man, the second that curtain dropped, he owned that stage.
Yep.
Like, I worked a Seal concert, and Seal's probably 6'3", 6'4", and Seal owns the stage, but to have a guy foot and a half shorter own the stage just as much was incredible. What an incredible concert. Yeah. All right, anything else on Prince? Or can we move on to your next one?
I'll do my next one, sure. This is a little bit of an oddball here, probably, but I'm going to go with Madness. And if people don't remember Madness, if you grew up in the 80s and watched MTV at all, you probably remember a song called House of Fun. They had another one called Our House. They were kind of the ska pop. They were part of this like ska revival thing that happened in Britain in the 1980s. And they just have this wonderful sound. They're so much fun. This is a fun band. This is a band that I want on every playlist that I make, just to kind of like, lighten it up a little bit. They have, you hear the ska in there, but they've got these great hooks. It's lively, energetic, fun music. And it has this kind of, they're from, I think, Camden Town, London, which is in the northwest of London. And they have this very London attitude. It's like the street smart, London kind of Cockney thing going on that's hard to describe, but if you listen to their music, you just pick it right up. And again, it's just, I think probably we'll cover a few songs that are really just about walking in the rain and feeling it come down on your head and washing the weariness away. Again, that's that, symbolism about renewal. And I think my first experience with this band was actually on the Young Ones. They guest starred on the do you remember the Young Ones TV show that I aired on MTV?
I am aware of it. I don't think I ever saw it.
It's sort of an acquired taste. Very British humor, sort of operating at two levels, at the almost silly, like slapstick level, and also these jokes that almost go over your head at the same time. And it's happening so fast, it's almost kind of hard to pick one sort of strain of humor from the other, but they would just have these bands show up in the middle of whatever narrative they were trying to create, and Madness was one of them. They played this crazy set, and then sort of to the extent that the show had a plot, it would just kind of go on from there without making a whole lot of sense.
And what's the name of your song again? I don't know if you said Madness. What was
called?
The name?
The Sun and the Rain.
The Sun and the Rain.
Yep.
By Madness.
The Sun and the Rain by Madness. Just a fun song. I encourage you to go out and go check it out.
And you've picked a song that I know nothing about. I know nothing about the band, and I have nothing to add to what you just said, because that is just, I've never heard of that, but I'm going to go look it up because
fair enough.
Sounds fun. So my next song is a novelty song, I guess you could call it, by a group that probably only had this song called the Weather Girls.
The Weather Girls.
The Weather Girls, and everybody knows this song. It's Raining Men.
It's Raining Men. Okay.
Hallelujah.
I don't think I could have told you who wrote that song. Who performed
the Weather,
that song.
yeah, is the Weather Girls. But I'm going to tell you something about the main singer of that, because I'm going to make a connection that most people probably can't make. So first of all, though, It's Raining Men. I was stunned to learn many, many years ago who wrote It's Raining Men, and it was written by the band leader of The Late Show with David Letterman, Paul Schaefer. He wrote that song back in the late 70s with yes. So Paul Schaefer wrote It's Raining Men. It was his kind of one poppy hit. He shopped it around at the time. Donna Summer, Diana Ross, Barbra Streisand all turned it down. I have in my notes here, Donna Summer found the song to be blasphemous. And so I guess she's very religious.
Blasphemous.
Yeah, she called it blasphemous.
Interesting.
And interestingly, the Weather Girls were originally, the original name of their group was Two Tons of Fun. Because the Weather Girls were, hefty gals. What's interesting, though, is one of the two Weather Girls was a woman named Martha Wash. People don't know who Martha Wash is, but people from my generation are familiar with Martha Wash's voice, because she sang all of the songs with CNC Music Factory.
CNC Music.
Yes.
Okay.
So the female singer on CNC Music Factory was Martha Wash. When you watch the videos for CNC Music Factory, you saw
Someone
not
else.
Martha Wash.
Yeah.
And Martha Wash sued and sued and sued and finally got the recognition she deserved as being the voice, the female voice of CNC Music Factory. Everybody Dance Now, that's Martha Wash. That's the same woman singing It's Raining Men 20 years later. Yeah.
I'm still wrapping my brain around Paul Schaefer,
Paul Schaefer
writing that. I always kind of wondered what else he was up to, because he seemed, I guess when I sort of became familiar with him when he was on the David Letterman show, and he was clearly like an established person in the music scene, but I had like, no frame of reference at that point, and I didn't know sort of why he was famous. And then I realized he'd been on Saturday Night Live as part of their house
first band leader. Yeah.
But apparently he was also writing It's Raining Men.
He was writing It's Raining Men. Yeah.
His resume keeps growing the more I learn about him.
And he's one of those guys, he's kind of like a Bad Penny in a way that whenever you need a really good musician to lead a band for a tribute, Paul Schaefer's there.
Yep.
He's there at the keyboards. He's done a bunch of podcast interviews too. He's a really fascinating guy, actually. He's Canadian. He kind of came up at the same time that like SCTV started in Canada. So the Martin Shorts and Eugene Levy's and Catherine O'Hara, like that whole group. Paul Schaefer was a part of that group.
So he kind of rode that to David Letterman and beyond.
Yeah, there's a very famous thing. Like there's a Godspell, which is a Broadway show. There was a revival of it up in Canada, and it had all of those people I just named, all those SCTV comic geniuses. Paul Schaefer was like the musical director on that, and they were all in college at the time. They all knew each other. John Candy was a part of that. So I don't think Paul Schaefer gets the recognition he needs as kind of a musical genius that he is. He's really good. But yes, he wrote It's Raining Men.
Okay, well,
hallelujah. And Martha Wash definitely did not get the recognition she deserved for that song or for all the CNC Music Factory stuff she did.
Yeah, that's a theme I'm going to touch on later, by the way.
CNC there are a lot Music Factory or people that didn't get credit?
And specifically women who don't get credit for their contributions to music. But
all right, so that's mine. It's Raining Men. What do you got next?
I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction on this next one. This is a song that probably isn't immediately going to be familiar to a lot of people, but I guarantee you've heard it. It's a classical piece, and it's one of those ones that just gets picked up in like TV commercials or as the background to movies when they, need something that sounds very classical and proper. It's Handel, part of the Water Music Suite 2. It's like officially Water Music Suite 2 in D major Allegro, so it's one piece of a larger, I think it's about an hour long piece of music. And the reason I find this interesting is there's a little bit of a story behind it. Handel composed this for King George I, who at the time, this is in the early 18th century, so the 1700s, and King George I had the son who was a little bit of a man about town, and he was making a name for himself as, these guys were all crazy. I can't even remember which of the King Georges was considered the crazy one, but they both sort of like to stage these big events, and it seemed like George I was getting a bit upstaged by his son George II, the future George II, I should say, and wasn't happy about this. So he decided that he was going to stage this event of this procession of barges down the Thames River in London, from Whitehall over near where Big Ben is, into the Chelsea neighborhood, and he commissioned Handel to write this suite of pieces for it. And they held this procession. It was grand. There was one barge carrying the orchestra and another with the king and his entourage. And the king loved it so much he made them go up and down the river like 4 times playing it. So it's Handel was part of the sort of era of classical music called Baroque. So he was a contemporary with Bach, but his music kind of has this playfulness and almost a sense of humor about it. When he writes about water, you can kind of hear the kind of like the rippling, and there's Baroque music has all these sort of little trills and ornamentations, and he can sort of make it sound like running water. And, it's almost in a way like a tonal poet, like a tonal poem, like the um, the Romantics a century later were doing. So in a way, it was ahead of its time. And again, the water music suite, I guarantee you've heard it somewhere before, just because it's so commonly used in pop culture, but people don't really know where to attribute it. So go seek it out. It's a good one.
Yeah, I guess Handel's Messiah is probably the Handel.
The Messiah, yeah. If you've
that's
heard
what
this,
everybody
yeah,
knows from
church
Handel,
or
yeah.
from whatever. The Messiah
from
is
Christmas.
Yep, Christmas, exactly.
It's just a song that's become synonymous with Christmas. So
yeah,
that's a good one. Well, yeah, I guess a lot of classical music, you recognize it when you hear it, but you have no idea who wrote it or anything else about it.
Yep. And the interesting thing too is the Thames River, the Thames, excuse me, if you want to pronounce it.
Yes, the Thames.
It's actually considered one of the cleanest rivers that goes through a major city in the world.
Really?
Yeah, it's it's got a real diversity of wildlife. People see the brown color and they assume that it's just kind of dirty, but it goes through a lot of farmland, so it picks up a lot of silt and that kind of thing. But the water quality is actually really good. You still can't drink it because it's a tidal river and it tends to have a lot of salt in it, which kind of rules it out for drinking water. But it's a very clean river,
and that is the perfect segue into my next song.
I was trying to set you up there.
Yeah,
Kevin.
you did. You set me up, and I will preface this selection by saying the RWA does not endorse the title of this song, but it is a song, and this is kind of a subtle shout out to my good friend Nick DeVekis, who's also a water nerd down in New Jersey. This song is the Dave Matthews Band. My friend Nick DeVekis has seen them over 80 times in concert. He goes 2 to 3 times a year to see Dave Matthews. And the name of this song, again, RWA does not endorse this, but the name of the song is Don't Drink the Water. So this song, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because kind of the I guess the genesis of this song is a little bit depressing, but it's a very good song. If you haven't heard it, listen to it. So Dave Matthews is from South Africa, grew up during apartheid, and he wrote "Don't Drink the Water" as kind of the way a South African sees what happened to the Native Americans, and kind of like there's a song by Iron Maiden called "Run to the Hills," which is kind of their interpretation. So "Don't Drink the Water" is Dave Matthews' interpretation. It's the guilt and denial and moral conflict that went on at that time, and "Don't Drink the Water" was his symbolism for the bloodshed and contamination of the land through violence. So not lighthearted as Raining Men stuff, but it's a very good song.
No, and I learned another thing. I had no idea that Dave Matthews was South African.
Yep, Dave Matthews, South African. Alanis Morissette did backup vocals on "Don't Drink the Water" too, which is something I did not know. And if my buddy Nick in New Jersey listens to this episode, he's probably going to yell at the radio 100 other things about this song that I'm not going to say, but I just quickly wanted to throw in the Dave Matthews "Don't Drink the Water" again. RWA does not endorse the title of that song. What do you got next?
It's funny that I was actually kind of you're leading me along in a direction that I wanted to go.
Oh, good.
Talking about Iron Maiden.
This was not rehearsed, by the way.
No, it was not.
Yes.
Yeah. But who would you say is the godfather of heavy metal?
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But a lot of people would say that it was actually this guy, Dick Dale. Do you know why?
Tell me. I'm familiar with Dick Dale, but I'm not sure that I would associate him with heavy metal.
So if you listen to songs, Dick Dale was probably one of the most prominent figures in surf rock, surf music. And if you think of the surf rock songs that you know, probably other than Beach Boys, you'll probably hear this like almost vibrating guitar sound, right? Where they're just kind of doing this tremolo, this picking tremolo on one like droning note, and then playing others along the neck. That is the Dick Dale sound, and he used to play it on this. He had this like guitar sound that was caused. He used these super heavy strings, so it's got this really. It's almost like he's playing it on a piano string or something. Like he's picking on a piano string, and a lot of people say that that sort of anticipates the sound that you hear in a lot, especially more modern, like speed metal bands, where they just kind of hammer away on the E string, usually detuned or whatever. It's just got this very specific sound. So sometimes Dick Dale is called the father of heavy metal, and he
He wasn't Wipeout, was he? Was that wasn't Dick Dale, was it?
Wipeout was no, it was somebody else. I'm kind
Somebody
of
else,
blanking on
okay.
it, but it's a very similar kind of
Yeah.
sound too. You know, I'm not sure which came first. Uh, but Dick Dale, first of all, one of the things that distinguishes him from a lot of the other surf rock names is he was actually a surfer. He started surfing when he was like 17 years old. You know, the Beach Boys rose to fame on the sort of surf rock sound, but were not actually. I think Brian Wilson had some sort of terrifying incident in the water when he was a kid and wouldn't go near it. So
Yeah, I think only one of the Wilsons was a surfer.
only one of the
Yeah.
Wilsons was a surfer, but Dick Dale was an actual surfer.
Actually
and
died surfing. I think it was Dennis. I think it was Dennis Wilson died in a surfing accident.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry.
So yeah, there's some history there. But yeah, Dick Dale was an avid surfer. He sometimes described his music, the energy in his music, as, you know, being a lot like being on a wave and riding it, just kind of that really intense, like rushing energy that he tried to create. And he had been around for a while by the time this came out, but he did a re-recording of a song by the Chantals called Pipeline. And he recorded it with Stevie Ray Vaughan, who was the famous Texas-based blues guitarist, you know, considered a little bit of a blues guitar god by people who were sort of around during that time. And the recording was used in the movie Back to the Beach.
I am so glad you brought up Back to the Beach.
Do you know
'cause
Back to the Beach?
I was sitting here thinking, I'm going to bring up Back to the Beach about Dick Dale, but you brought it up. I love that movie.
I'm like kind of meh on it, but I appreciate it, and I appreciate the music.
The
in the movie.
humunga cowabunga from down under.
I mean, it's got appearances by Bob Denver, Gilligan,
Yep.
and Pee Wee Herman,
Yep.
and you know, of course, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Dick Dale make
That's
a
right.
memorable appearance.
If
So
you're not
it's-
familiar with this movie, it's Annette Funicello, Frankie Avalon. They did a
That's
whole bunch
right.
of beach movies back in the 60s, and then in the late 80s, they decided to do a movie called Back to the Beach, which is literally one of the dumbest movies you will ever see, but I love it, and it's funny, and I'm going to have
yeah,
to
it's
go
kind of
watch it
like
again.
sort of if you like did a weird like crossbreed between Animal House and Gidget, you might end up
Yeah.
with something like that, you know.
Yeah. Oh my God. Back to the Beach. Yep.
So yeah, but anyhow, it's just a masterpiece of a tune. Pipeline. Look for the version with Dick Dale and Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because there were kind of, I think you and I collectively could have done a whole show on Beach Boys songs that have allusions to the water because they're, you know, Surfing Safari.
Oh yeah,
and
that's a whole different
Surfing
show.
USA
Yep.
and all that. But you
I
know,
think almost all of them.
all of them. Yeah.
Little Deuce Coupe, maybe not,
and,
but
yeah, and rest in peace, Brian Wilson, who recently passed
thank you.
away. The true genius of the Beach Boys, despite what Mike Love will tell you. So my next song is you know, double connection to water because it's one of the premier yacht rock songs out there, by one of the premier yacht rockers, Christopher Cross.
oh great.
And that song is Sailing. I had two choices for songs about sailing, and again, these are allusions to water, so we stretch it a little bit. I could have done Come Sail Away by Styx, another great song. But I went with Sailing because big Christopher Cross fan. I don't think he gets the respect he deserves as a yacht rocker. So that song came out in 1980. It was won Grammy. It won Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Arrangement. So that song got Christopher Cross a lot of awards that year. He wrote it, shockingly, because he used to go on sailing trips. And he wrote the song about the emotions that he felt. When he talks about that song, he basically says it's a good thing that my friends and I didn't go bowling because you would be listening to a song called Bowling. I mean, it was really that simple. He just wrote a song about his
Something that he liked
experiences,
doing.
something he liked
Yep.
doing, something he liked thinking about. That song is kind of known as the quintessential yacht rock song of the 70s and 80s. Christopher Cross is out there touring right now. Actually,
He's still touring, yeah.
He's still touring. He's touring this
amazing.
year with Men at Work and I forget. Oh, Toto. So that's
Men at
the tour.
Work.
Men at Work. Who can it
So,
be now?
who can it be now? Yeah, what's the name of the singer? He was
Colin Hay.
Colin Hay. So he was doing a solo tour. He actually played in New Haven a couple of times. I think back, I don't know, probably 10 years or so ago. But I remember seeing his name.
I saw
Might have been at
Colin
Cafe
Hay.
9.
Yep, I saw Colin Hay solo probably 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Fantastic show.
that's what I heard. I didn't attend it myself.
Fantastic show. Anyway, but yeah, Colin Hay's great. So that's Sailing. It's a great song.
Christopher Cross was like huge for like 10 minutes in the early 80s. I mean, he's been sort of a name since then, but like for a while you couldn't turn on. Remember the
you had Arthur's Theme.
Yep. I think that probably was what broke what he sort of broke through with. And then there was the
Run Like the
TV
Wind
series about the hapless superhero.
Oh, yeah. That was
Who can it be?
Greatest American Hero.
Greatest
was
American
that Christopher
Hero.
Cross?
That was he wrote the theme song for that.
He did. Okay.
Yeah.
And and Run Like the Wind, which I actually, there's a documentary, I think it's on HBO Max about yacht rock, and Christopher Cross talks about the song Run Like the Wind, where he basically said he was riding in a convertible completely high on acid, and that's how he wrote Run Like the Wind.
I didn't figure him for an acid guy.
Listen, going back to Neil Sedaka, he tells lots of stories about doing cocaine, and you wouldn't think
cocaine. I'd kind of figure, it was that era, but
it was the 70s, man.
The 70s, man. Anything was cool.
Yeah, so we're kind of covering the gamut from classical rock to yacht rock to, I don't know if we've done any real metal yet, but what do you got? What's your next song?
Both Kevin and I'm going to just disclose right now, both Kevin and I are sort of closet metalheads. A
little bit.
But, I'm kind of staying away from that because it's just such a niche thing. And, I'm not sure. I want to stay with stuff that people are more likely to know or have heard or, at least take an interest in if we recommend it. So the next one, this is almost about as, I don't know if I want to call it mainstream as it gets, but and we're going back to the theme that I started with today, which is flooding and renewal. But this is When the Levee Breaks by I want to say by Led Zeppelin because that's where people know it from, but it was actually written by somebody called Memphis Minnie and her partner Kansas Joe back in like the 1920s, 1929. And I believe they're credited actually on the Led Zeppelin album that it appears, but this was originally, sort of Mississippi Delta blues song that they repurposed, and to Led Zeppelin's credit, they probably drew a lot of attention to the original authors by covering it. So, I think they get slammed sometimes for taking music and sort of reappropriating it or whatever, but I think you should look at both sides of that because. They also drew a lot of attention to Delta blues.
I've gotten into a lot of arguments with people because I call Led Zeppelin a glorified cover band because they stole so much stuff.
They did. They made it their own though.
Yeah, but still, I mean, they did what Elvis did. Elvis. Most of Elvis's songs were black artists that he was just covering. Hound Dog and yeah.
I think the Beatles did that too. What's cool about Memphis Minnie, though, is she was actually a guitarist. And there are a couple of relatively unknown female, African-American female guitarists who were very influential back during sort of the 20s, 30s, and 40s and ended up influencing a lot of more modern artists. And they rarely get mentioned. Sister Rosetta Tharpe is a good example. She was sort of a guitar god, like a rock guitar god before like guitar gods were a thing, and really before rock was a thing.
Yeah, she just went into the Hall of Fame a few years ago.
Actually, very deservedly. Deservedly. Excuse me. And yeah, Memphis Minnie was another one. Just fantastic guitarist and songwriter, but I think it was Kansas Joe who got the credit for this song, and and then Led Zeppelin covered it 50 years or so later, and it's sort of classic for that John Bonham's opening drum line, and then that almost droning guitar sound, which is very different from the original, and that's why I'm kind of saying they took it and made it their own, because it really is a different sound, a different feel. But it's sort of the same story, right? When if it keeps on raining, the levee's going to break, and if the levee breaks, I'll have nowhere to stay. Very classic of the Mississippi blues sound, and sort of that pain and anxiety that people living hard and poor would have felt back then. So
It is a very bluesy, good song. And I will say
yeah,
this about Zeppelin. I kind of rag on them a lot, but individually, I mean, they're all amazing musicians. I mean, you
absolutely.
can't deny Jimmy Page is one of the great guitar players ever. You know,
Wouldn't even try to.
yeah,
And especially if you look what he does live, it just
yeah,
so powerful.
yeah.
Um,
I when I did concert security, I worked a Jimmy Page Black Crowes concert. So they toured together for a couple of years, and they did all Zeppelin songs. It was fantastic.
yeah.
And they just a couple of weeks ago re-released an album, a live album, Jimmy Page Black Crowes album of that tour. They were great. They were great. Jimmy Page, I'll always remember I had to have a security guard on stage standing at the guitars, and there were two people that were allowed in that section, and it was Jimmy and his guitar tech, and nobody else was allowed to go near the guitars.
I can
Um,
see why. I mean,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, listen, those are $1 million guitars. Um, all right, so I think we have time for a couple of more songs. I'm gonna go with next, and again, I came in here with close to 20 songs, knowing we weren't gonna get into them all. But the next song, I love this song, and it's Simon and Garfunkel, "Bridge Over Troubled Water."
That's a good one.
I mean, is there anything better than Art Garfunkel singing "Bridge Over Troubled Water" live? Uh, Paul Simon wrote it, totally planned on singing it himself, and basically everybody else in the music industry and in the record label told Paul, no, Art's singing this one. Which, I guess could be why they don't like each other, because they really don't like each other. um so this, it was written, as I read, during Vietnam and civil rights struggles, but it was written as a song to kind of bring comfort and solidarity to the country. um Paul Simon has always said he regretted not being the one to sing it. I've heard Paul Simon sing it.
Yeah.
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 Listen, Art Garfunkel,
Yeah.
man. Jeez, that guy.
Did
So
did they reunited recently for a concert, didn't they?
no,
Am I?
so Paul Simon retired from touring and then came out of retirement and then retired again last week because he had to have back surgery. Art Garfunkel has not done. I looked into this recently. Art Garfunkel hasn't done anything in about 4 or 5 years. I don't think he's doing too good health wise. Um,
That's a shame.
yeah, so Aretha Franklin, Elvis, and Johnny Cash have all covered this song. Um, I also think there's like a metal version of it too. I
I'm
forget who
sure
did.
there is.
I
There
forget
has
who
to
did
be.
it. I'll tell you one quick Art Garfunkel story. I worked an Art Garfunkel concert, and he does his concert. It was a good concert. And when after the main songs, the guys go off stage and everybody pretends like they're clapping so that there's going to be an encore. Well, Art Garfunkel comes off stage and actually listens. And if the crowd's not loud enough, Art Garfunkel does not go back out on stage. And I know that because I had the set list, and there was 3 encores on the set list. And Art Garfunkel came off stage, stood there for about 2 minutes, looked at us, and said, "Nope."
I mean,
House.
does he have like a decibel meter or something? Like,
It's
is
his
there some
ear.
sort of objective
Yeah.
criterion for?
He literally looked, said, "Nope, house lights," and walked into his dressing room. And that was it. I saw somebody else do that too. Don Henley did
Don
almost
Henley?
the same thing.
I mean, though, if you think about it, like on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are these bands that are practically begging to come on for an encore.
Yeah.
They'll do their thing. There'll be polite applause afterwards. They go off stage and then they come back anyhow. It doesn't,
Yep.
People are sort of already headed back to their cars and done with the show.
The craziest part of both of these, Garfunkel and Don Henley, is 3 of their biggest songs were in the encore, and the crowds didn't get to hear them.
Oh,
I did. Bridge Over Troubled Water was one of the encores. The crowd never got to hear it. Don Henley, Desperado was one of the encores. The crowd never got to hear it because they weren't loud enough.
and arguably they probably would have been a lot louder if they'd played those songs and gotten an encore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, Ed, hit us with your last song.
Oh boy, I don't have a lot left, but I did want to talk a little bit. I think there should be an honorable mention of the Carpenters here,
All
and
right, go for it.
Rainy Days and Mondays.
Never let you down.
Just a beautiful song, but as they never let you down.
That's
Exactly.
right.
Um, but the Carpenters, I'm gonna argue the Carpenters are a local act. They were from New Haven. They grew up here. I think they moved away somewhere in their teen years, but they're local to New Haven, and I think always cherished in our memory here. Rainy Days and Mondays is a beautiful song. It just really showcases Karen Carpenter's voice.
Beautiful voice.
It's a beautiful voice. What surprised me about her, just looking into it a little bit more, I knew she was a drummer, but she was considered like one of, during the time when they were performing, she was considered one of the great drummers in rock and roll. She was, and if you hear, like, she doesn't really play, the Carpenters don't really play a style of drumming that showcases their skills, and you don't hear it with their songs, but there are a couple of video clips of her like doing drum solos, and she's just amazing. You know, like polyrhythms, and like she's got all these jazz chops and like doing this Buddy Rich stuff. It's almost shocking if you just know her for this beautiful kind of, lovely singing voice that she has. But that kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I same way. Every once in a while, you stumble across these Karen Carpenter drumming videos, and you're like, "Oh my God, look at her go!"
She was really amazing.
All right, so that is going to conclude our music show. I got about another 10 songs on my list, so maybe we'll do another one of these shows in the future. But with the time left, we're going to hit Ed with our 5 unrelated questions. These are questions that have nothing to do with the previous 50 minutes of talking, except one of my 5 unrelated questions actually does have to do with what we just talked about. So I hope you forgive me for that. But first question, do you have any pets?
I do. I have a cat.
You have a cat. Name?
Her name is Pink.
Pink. How did Pink get her name?
I wish there were a great story behind this, but I have a son who's now 6. I think he was 3, I think, when we got the cat, and I said, "What should we name her?" And without blinking, he just says Pink, which kind of interesting because she doesn't have really any pink on her body, but like.
Hey, listen, that's fine.
Yeah.
Second question that is completely related. Who's your favorite band or musician?
Oh, that's a tough one. Can I give a shout out to a local act?
Yeah, listen, it's your thing, man.
There was a band that was big in the late 90s in New Haven called the Big Bad Johns, and they did this kind of just really energetic punkabilly thing, like sort of punk rock attitude, punk rock energy, but sort of more of a rockabilly sound. And they just, I think everybody thought they were going to sort of get a contract and go places, and it didn't quite happen. But
Are they still around, or
they reunite every couple of years? Like Detroit Dick, the singer, comes back from California where he's been living, and the other guys will get together and they'll play like one show at Cafe 9. And,
cool.
Yeah, so you get a chance to see it. They're all a little bit older and grayer, but they can still play, and it's just a great show. A lot of energy. And other than, if you're asking me to pick just sort of a generic band that everybody knows, I don't know, the Ramones, Black Sabbath, something like that. It's just,
Black Sabbath, who, as we record this, just did their final show together.
I know, right?
And it was better than I think most people thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, these guys aren't getting any younger, but they can still play. Even Ozzy can still sing, which is amazing.
Ozzy did okay. What is your favorite hobby?
I have a 6-year-old. Isn't that a hobby? I don't know. I like cycling. I like traveling. I don't, most of my time. I used to play trumpet, but I kind of gave that up when my son arrived. So,
kids.
Yeah.
Cookies, brownies, or ice cream?
So I actually looked into this. There's a Ben and Jerry's flavor, a cookies and brownies Ben and Jerry's flavor. So I'm gonna say
Ben and Jerry's.
I'm gonna say all 3.
All right.
Can I get away with that?
Sure.
Is that a cop out?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Listen, you picked an ice cream that happens to have cookies and brownies in it. What am I gonna do?
It's a loophole.
There you go. Last question with the couple of minutes we have left. Who's your favorite teacher in school and why?
Which school?
Any school throughout your entire schooling career, was there one teacher
Yeah,
that comes
actually.
to mind?
So when I was at Hamden High School in the um, late '80s, don't uh, the, not to put too fine a point on my age there was a guy named John Crotty who was sort of like he was like the hippie teacher, which I think there's a parallel in like South Park or no, Beavis and Butthead.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But this guy was the real deal. You know, he was uh, very nice guy, but an excellent teacher. And in my senior year, I had the opportunity to take what we officially called like a blow off class. You know, I'd already gotten into college. I didn't really have anything to prove on my transcript. So I just took something that looked like it would be easy and fun. And there was a course in, I think it was called science fiction and mythology or something like that. And again, I thought it was just going to be sort of an interesting, fun course, but it was the first time that I really learned how to read at a level where I'm like um, thinking about what the author was not just like thinking about the story, the narrative, the characters, or whatever, but what is the author really trying to say here? Whether the author is like some ancient Greek or Arthur C. Clarke or what have you. So I learned more in that class than I've learned in a half a dozen other English classes over the course of my academic career.
Great. There you have it. So uh, that's it for this week's Liquid Lunch at the Regional Water Authority. You know, I end every show with kind of saying the one thing I want our listeners to take away from the show, but sometimes you don't have to take anything away from the show. This was just a fun show about music. You can listen back, write down the names of the songs, go listen to them. Um,
Can we post the links on the
we might be
YouTube?
able to.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that. That's a good idea.
So if you look up Liquid Lunch with Kevin Watsy on YouTube.
Now, with the Regional Water Authority.
With the Regional Water Authority,
Yes.
excuse me.
Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority on YouTube. We'll try and post some links in there. So until the next show, this has been Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority, and enjoy the nice hot days of the summer. Thanks.